The cameras were rolling when a 6-year-old girl named Chloe Patterson walked to the center of the Family Feud stage in Atlanta, Georgia, picked up the microphone that was twice the size of her face, and said in a voice so small and so steady that it somehow carried to every corner of the studio, "I'm playing so my daddy can come home. Not my family wants to win. Not we want the prize money." A 6-year-old girl in a yellow dress and white ribbons in her hair, who barely reached the podium, had just told 300 strangers the truest thing any child had ever said in that building. Steve Harvey, who had been mid-sentence 3 feet away from her, stopped speaking. He took one step back. His hands went still. Then, he put his hand over his mouth, turned his back to the audience, and walked to the edge of the stage. A producer reached toward him. Steve shook his head. He stood there with his back to the cameras for 11 seconds. When he turned around, his eyes were wet, and his voice was different, quieter, lower, stripped of the performance. He looked at Chloe and said, "Baby, tell me about your daddy." It was a Friday in March 2023, and the Pattersons had driven 7 hours from Shreveport, Louisiana to Atlanta in a rented minivan. Denise Patterson had packed sandwiches and juice boxes and downloaded movies onto a tablet for Chloe and her older brother Jalen, who was 11. She'd told the kids it was an adventure. She'd been telling them a lot of things were adventures lately. It was easier than the truth, and the truth was too large and too sharp for a 7-hour car ride with children who needed to believe things were going to be okay. The family had worn matching green shirts, Denise's idea. She'd ironed them the morning before they left, in the kitchen of a house that had too much silence in it. Chloe had wanted to wear her yellow dress instead of the green shirt, and Denise had let her. Because Chloe was 6 and she was heartbreakingly good about most things, and she deserved to wear the yellow dress. The warm-up had gone fine. The other family, the Williams family from Charlotte, were warm and funny and the kind of people you genuinely hoped had a good day. Steve had come out and worked the room with his usual ease, and Denise had laughed at his jokes and answered his questions and thought, "I can do this. I can hold it together for 1 hour. We need to hold it together for 1 hour." But nobody in that studio knew what was waiting inside that yellow dress. Marcus Patterson had been incarcerated at the Louisiana State Penitentiary in Angola for 14 months when Denise applied to be on Family Feud. He was not a violent man. He had never been a violent man. He was a 33-year-old electrician who had made one decision on one night that had cost him everything. A decision that came out of desperation and fear after he lost his job during the 2nd month of a medical crisis that had already drained every dollar they had. Chloe had been 4 when he went in. Jalen was 9. Denise had tried to explain prison to her children the way you explain things to children, when the truth is unbearable, in pieces, softened at the edges. Jalen had cried for 3 days when Marcus left, and then gone very quiet in a way that scared her more than the crying had. Chloe had been too young to fully understand, but she'd understood the absence. She'd understood that the chair at the dinner table was empty and that nobody sat in it. She'd started asking questions around month 4. Where is Daddy? And when is Daddy coming home? And the worst one said very softly at bedtime one night, "Did I make Daddy sad? Is that why he left?" Denise had held her daughter in the dark and said, "No, baby, no, that's not it. That's not it at all." But there is no version of that conversation that doesn't leave a mark on both people in the bed. The financial reality of a single mother with 2 children, a mortgage, and a husband in Angola was brutal in the specific, documented way that brutality often is. Marcus had been the primary earner. Denise worked as a medical coder from home, good work, steady, but not enough for a household of 3 on its own. She'd taken on additional coding contracts in the evenings. She'd applied for every assistance program she qualified for. She'd accepted help from her mother in Shreveport that she hadn't been able to pay back. She'd sold the second car. She'd called the mortgage company twice about forbearance. Both times she'd been told the process was under review. The second time, the review had resulted in a late fee. Marcus was eligible for parole in 11 months. 11 months felt like a country she wasn't sure she could walk to. And that wasn't even the part that made Steve Harvey leave the stage. The part that made Steve leave was what Chloe said before the game even started. It had come out of nowhere, or what looked like nowhere to the audience, though Denise would later explain that it had actually come from a conversation in the minivan somewhere in Mississippi, when Chloe had asked again why they were going to be on television. Denise had said, truthfully, that winning the money could really help the family, and Chloe, 6 years old, processing the world with the particular clarity of children who haven't yet learned to make things complicated, had said, if we win enough money, can Daddy come home faster? Denise had said she didn't think it worked exactly like that, sweetheart. Chloe had been quiet for a minute. Then she'd said, then I'll just play really good. So we can help. On the stage in Atlanta, when Steve had asked the families why they'd come on the show, Chloe had stepped forward. Nobody had told her to. Walked to the microphone and said it. I'm playing so my daddy can come home. The studio fell completely silent, in the way it does, when something true has been said by someone who doesn't know yet that the world usually asks you to say things less truthfully. Steve Harvey walked to the edge of the stage. He stood there for 11 seconds. When he turned around, he looked at Chloe with a look that the camera caught and that 200 million people would later see on their phones. And he knelt down on the stage floor, so he was at her eye level. Baby, he said. What's your name? Chloe. Chloe. How old are you? 6. She held up 5 fingers, then one more, as if she wasn't entirely sure he could count. Steve made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and something that had no name in English. He pressed his handkerchief to his face and stayed crouched for a moment. Tell me about your daddy, he said. What's he like? Chloe thought about this very seriously. He's tall, she said. He puts me on his shoulders. And he smells good, like the blue soap. She paused. He calls me every Sunday. I tell him about my week. He says, good job, Cece. That's his name for me. Cece, 300 people. Not one of them made a sound. Steve straightened up slowly. He looked at Denise. How long has your husband been away? 14 months, Denise said. Her voice was steady in the way that only works because everything underneath it is not. Steve nodded. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, stop everything. We're going to stop the game for a minute. He held up his hand toward the producer station. A stage manager looked alarmed. Steve shook his head at her, slowly, and she stepped back. Let me tell you something, he said. And he was talking to Denise, but also to the whole room. I want everybody to hear this. He turned to face the camera directly. I want to talk to everyone watching at home. Because I'm looking at a 6-year-old girl who drove 7 hours to play a game show, because she believes it might help bring her daddy home. And I need to say this clearly. That is the most love I have ever seen on this stage in 30 years of television. He turned back to Chloe. You know what I know about your daddy, Cece? I know he's raising the right little girl. Because the right little girl just stood up in front of all these people and told the truth. He reached into his jacket. I know what it is to need help and not know how to ask for it. I know what it is to feel like you're out of options. I slept in my car for 3 years. I was showering in gas station bathrooms. I had nothing. And I know that when somebody sees you, really sees you, it changes something. So here's what we're doing. He pulled out his phone and called his legal team on the spot. Right there on the stage, with the cameras running. He asked them to review Marcus Patterson's case, look at the parole timeline, and identify whether any legal support or advocacy could accelerate the process. He said it clearly, on the air, so every person in the room heard the commitment. A producer 2 steps off stage whispered something to a colleague. Steve talked right over it. "But I'm not done," he said. He wasn't. Steve announced that the full prize, $25,000, was going to the Patterson family regardless of the game's outcome. Then he announced that the Williams family from Charlotte would receive an equal amount from his personal fund. The Williams family captain, a man named Anthony, crossed the stage without a word, crouched down to Chloe's level the same way Steve had, and said, "Cece, you just won this for everybody." Chloe put her small hand in his and shook it very seriously. The studio fell completely silent and then erupted in something that wasn't really applause. It was louder and less organized than applause, more like the sound a room makes when it collectively decides to stop holding something back. 3 months after that taping, Marcus Patterson was granted early parole consideration, supported in part by legal advocacy that had begun, though nobody could have predicted this, with a phone call made on a game show stage in Atlanta. He came home on a Wednesday afternoon in June, 6 months before his original projected release date. Chloe Patterson was at the gate when the door opened. She was wearing the yellow dress. When the episode aired 8 weeks after the taping, the clip of Chloe at the microphone was viewed 210 million times in 11 days. The hashtag #ImPlayingForDaddy was used in 34 countries. It was played at conferences on childhood poverty. It was shown in schools. A child psychologist wrote an op-ed in the New York Times about what Chloe's statement revealed about the emotional intelligence of children who are rarely given credit for understanding their circumstances. A year after the taping, the C.C. Patterson Fund was established, named after Marcus's nickname for his daughter, with a focus on supporting children of incarcerated parents with school supplies, counseling, and family reunification travel costs. In its first 18 months, the fund helped over 800 families in 11 states. Today, Marcus Patterson coaches youth basketball on Saturday mornings in Shreveport. Chloe comes to every game. She sits in the bleachers in whatever she wants to wear. Sometimes the yellow dress, sometimes a jersey, once a tutu, and cheers for every player on the team regardless of score. Jalen, who is 13 now, has gotten loud again in the good way that teenagers are loud when things are okay. Denise made a video that she posted privately, not for public share, just for the family. Marcus walking through the door on that Wednesday in June. Chloe launching herself off the porch steps at him. Marcus catching her and putting her on his shoulders the way she described, and Chloe laughing from up there, so far above the ground that she could probably see everything she'd been waiting for. Steve Harvey, in a later interview, said, "I have hosted 1,000 episodes. I have seen extraordinary things, but I have never been more moved than the day a 6-year-old girl told me she was going to play a game show to bring her daddy home. That child taught a room full of adults something that we had all forgotten." He paused. She knew exactly what love was for. There are children in this world who carry more than any child should have to carry, and sometimes they carry it in yellow dresses, with white ribbons in their hair. And they walk to a microphone that is bigger than their face, and they say the truest thing in the room. And sometimes that truth is enough to change everything. If this story about a little girl's love for her daddy moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that children understand more than we think and love more than we know. Have you ever seen a child show a kind of courage that humbled you? Share it in the comments below and ring that notification bell for more stories that remind us what matters most. Because as Chloe Patterson proved, love is not complicated. It is just true.